Hello, my name is Elizabeth Nosek, and I work as the Curator of Education and Exhibits here at the Colorado Railroad Museum. Today, as part of our Small Wonders series, we are taking the second of 3 looks at our new exhibit in the lower gallery, Wheels of Misfortune, Pullman's Legacy of Innovation, Idealism and Exploitation. This episode will focus on the people who worked to make the Pullman Company one of the most important companies of the Gilded Age, and some of the social upheaval that resulted from that. George Pullman founded the Pullman Palace Car Company in 1867. He had been working toward this goal since before the Civil War. By 1883, he had shops with employees in St. Louis, Missouri, Detroit, Michigan, Elmira, New York, and Wilmington, Delaware. These workers manufactured sleeping cars, box cars, coal cars, baggage cars, chair cars, refrigerated cars, street cars, and mail cars. To build these rail cars, the company employed a wide range of skilled workers. Each brought their own unique set of skills and issues, but together they created an enterprise that reflected all the best and the worst of the Industrial Revolution's Gilded Age. As president and general manager, it was George M. Pullman's vision that led the Pullman Palace Car Company to success. His natural talent for seeing and taking advantage of opportunities, designing systems, and marketing the resulting products helped to establish his company as the company people thought of for comfortable travel. Robert Todd Lincoln, son of President Abraham Lincoln, served the Pullman Company in a variety of roles. Beginning in 1880, he served on the Pullman Palace Car Company Board of Directors. George Pullman also appointed Lincoln as Secretary of the Pullman Bank. Lincoln became president of the company in 1901. After resigning that position in 1911, he served as chairman of the board until 1922. Other company managers included Albert Pullman, George's brother, who handled the manufacturing end of the operation, and Charles Engel, who looked after the company's financial and legal affairs. Engel would later be fired for embezzling thousands of dollars from the company. A large number of workers at the Pullman factories were skilled craftspeople, such as carpenters, artists, glassworkers, brickmakers, and upholsterers. Accountants and mechanics were also employed. Efforts were even made to employ women in appropriate jobs such as sewing. These workers were culturally diverse, including immigrants from Scandinavia, Germany, England, and Ireland. The Pullman Company employed women as maids, car cleaners, office workers, and telegraph operators. Agnes Harper was the only female employee to work in the telegraph office at the Pullman factory. She lived in the company town of Pullman, Illinois, at this house. Workers in the shops were paid by the day. A workday lasted 10 to 11 hours. Wages started at $1.30 per day, and by 1897, unskilled workers earned $1.86. Journeyman mechanics earned $2.28 per day. Pullman porters and maids are among the most famous of the Pullman Company's employees. Originally hired after the Civil War for their experience as domestic slaves, porters turned down beds, fetched drinks, sent telegrams, shined shoes, cleaned carpets, served food, and more. Maids gave manicures, styled hair, and watched their passengers' children, among other tasks. Withstanding the attitudes of a culture that looked down on them, these men and women did their work with dignity and purpose. George Pullman and his company viewed Pullman porters as exploitable servants. They routinely worked 400 hours per month, and it was not unheard of for them to serve passengers for up to 21 hours a day. Porters were paid little and maids even less, both depending heavily on tips. Yet through their savings, these workers created the backbone of a growing black middle class, becoming highly respected in their communities for their knowledge and experience. Rather than their given names, Pullman porters were regularly called George, a shortened version of George Pullman's boy. Now, this was common practice during slavery when people referred to a slave by his master's name. The habit angered many Pullman porters, and eventually the Pullman Company issued name tags and cards that read, "This car is served by Porter John, George, Harry, etc. America not only expanded west during the 1870s and 1880s, but also enjoyed great economic growth. The railroad was a central industry during this time. The accompanying growing pains resulted in unforeseen consequences that are still part of our lives today. The Gilded Age's economic growth brought unimaginable wealth to a few at the cost of many. Workers banded together to form unions to negotiate a living wage and safer working conditions. And welcome in these unions, African Americans formed their own, the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters. In the 1880s, American railroads experienced what we call a bubble today. Investors flocked to the industry that was opening up the West, and as a result, railroads overbuilt. By the early 1890s, the growth was unsustainable, and when the bubble burst, it helped create the financial panic of 1893 and the economic depression that followed. The Pullman philosophy, happy workers make more productive workers, is what inspired George Pullman to build the utopian industrial city of Pullman, Illinois in 1880. He hoped that it would attract and keep workers and their families happy. Pullman, Illinois was an attractive, sanitary, and orderly town with a bank, library, theater, park, and homes. At its peak, 12,000 employees lived there. Pullman planned to pay for this ideal city through employee rents. However, rents never reached the 6% return he had promised his investors, making it impossible for him to be flexible during poor economic times. When orders for rail cars dropped in response to the panic of 1893, the Pullman Company laid off workers and lowered its remaining workers' wages, but not the rents they paid to live in the company town. On May 11, 1894, nearly 4,000 Pullman factory workers responded by going on strike for union recognition, wage increases, and rent reductions. In June, the American Railway Union joined the Pullman strikers in solidarity. A massive boycott against all trains carrying a Pullman car affected most rail lines west of Detroit, some 250,000 workers, and the United States Mail. The strike ended violently in mid-July when President Cleveland intervened with federal troops. What was once seen as a shining example of the American dream was now reflected in this quote from a resident of Pullman, Illinois. "We are born in a Pullman house, fed from the Pullman shop, taught in the Pullman school, catechized in the Pullman church, and when we die, we shall be buried in the Pullman cemetery and go to the Pullman hell." African Americans were not part of the Pullman strike of 1893. They were not permitted to join other unions, but like other workers, they strived to better their situation. When the company made it too difficult for the porters, the men enlisted their wives to take on organizing activities. In an ongoing attempt to unionize, Pullman porters recruited activist A. Philip Randolph to their cause. Though never a porter himself, Randolph's incorruptibility and negotiating skills were the perfect match for the task. The BSCP was not only the first African American labor union in the United States, but it was also central to the formation of what would later become the Civil Rights Movement. Whether you see him as a perfect businessman or the perfect villain, George M. Pullman's legacy of innovation, idealism, and exploitation have left their mark on our world today. The Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, a union organized by African American workers, didn't just help its members gain better pay and working conditions. It also helped pave the way for the Civil Rights Movement. Descendants of Pullman porters built upon their forefathers' and mothers' successes by making important contributions to society. In the early 20th century, the idea of a black man making a living of his own and passing that independence on to his children was new in the United States. Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall, Denver Mayor Wellington Webb Jr., Oscar-winning actress Whoopi Goldberg, three-time Olympic gold medalist Wilma Tornado Rudolph, and former First Lady Michelle Obama all have claimed Pullman porters as ancestors. When Rosa Parks was arrested for refusing to vacate her bus seat for a white person in December of 1955, she called the leader of the local Pullman Porters Union, By demonstrating the power of collective action, the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters helped African Americans propel the civil rights movement forward. The Pullman strike of 1894 marked a change in American culture. While the Supreme Court may have ruled in favor of the federal government's right to step in to protect commerce, the strike ushered in a new age. The United States Strike Commission formed to study the Pullman strike, endorse collective bargaining, and reject paternalistic approaches to settling disputes. And women began to step outside the bounds of family to find their political voice. In a political move before President Grover Cleveland sent in the federal troops to end the Pullman strike on June 28, 1894, legislation making Labor Day a national holiday was passed by Congress and signed into law by the President. Today, it is celebrated with parades, picnics, barbecues, and other community gatherings. Citing its significance as a planned industrial community, the centerpiece of the violent 1894 Pullman strike, and the company's importance as the nation's largest employer of African Americans, President Barack Obama designated Chicago's Pullman neighborhood as a national monument on February 19, 2015. I invite you to visit Wheels of Misfortune in the lower gallery at the Colorado Railroad Museum. It will be here through the end of 2022. Next time, on Small Wonders, I will bring you the third and final installment showcasing this exhibit by focusing on the products of Pullman. Please join us.
Like, comment, share, and subscribe. Commenting and sharing in particular may qualify as virtual engagements for important funding programs like the SCFD.